Hello, my name's Carlo de Chiro. I'm an occupational therapist and I graduated in 2011. Straight on to about the locum and bank work. Well, who can apply for it? Well, it is the case that for many locum positions they do ask for a year or two of experience, but it's not always the case as in my situation. It is more likely to get a locum role if you have worked previously though in a particular area, though, or even on your placement, but don't be put off to apply for locum agencies, as they do have roles at times where they will source newly qualified OTs for temporary and permanent contract roles for private and social services and the NHS, so it's still worth signing up for to agencies. If you do want to work in a specific area, it's better to have had a role in a similar service first before going for those roles, but if you can show transferable skills, that also helps. Obviously some roles are highly specialised and you will need specific skills and knowledge to work with those clients. You might have to do some mandatory training, which you might have to pay for to get some certificates, but don't let that stop you, because if you apply and you need that training, often they'll let you do that, say within the first week, that you can pay for, and the agencies can help you sort that out. As for bank work in the NHS, they will take newly qualified, definitely, mostly around the winter pressure times. Around September they take bank staff to start winter pressure, and they may extend after that. They might take on at other times if they have staff shortages, and then they put you into a pool and then they call upon you when you're needed. I definitely recommend though getting a very good CV written. Go to use the services at the job centre that are free and also at the university. You don't need to pay for a professional CV writer at all. Also write a cover letter that you can tweak, so you can have generic things in there, but also tweak it to the specific jobs as well to make your CV to help your CV and make it stand out. Obviously sign up to the job sites, put some automatic searches on there, let the jobs be emailed to yourself, apply, and if your CV is of interest to the agencies, they'll contact you, then arrange either an interview or speaking to them first, and then to the the employer in question as well. The negatives, really, well, applications can be very lengthy to join up for a locum agency. They can be very large and repetitive, and then obviously the agency wants you on the books, then you have to fill these in, and then they can draw on that information every time they look for work for you. Locum contracts can be quite short, on average about 3 months, so you've got to be prepared. Obviously at the end of the 3 months you might have to be looking for another role, and locum agencies of course will try to set you up with another role before the end, but obviously it's not always guaranteed, and there may be a gap. Hopefully not, if they can sort it out before the end of your current contract. Notice periods can be short, so obviously before the end of the contract they won't tell you it's going to be renewed, probably a week before the end, and that's difficulty in obviously locuming. It's good if you are concerned about it being renewed that you ask if a company has had locums before. You can see whether in the past locums have had a rolling contract for quite a while, and this is not a guarantee but an indicator whether they're likely to renew your contract at the end of the usual, as I say, 3 months. One of the deal breakers for many is if you're off sick or you're on a holiday, you won't get any pay. There may be some insurance for sickness, but I haven't looked into that at the moment. But if you go on holiday, you're not going to get any pay while you're there, because obviously you only get paid while you're doing the work. You're expected often to hit the ground running more than staff that are coming in who are going to be permanent. Expected to be doing the job a lot quicker. You may get some orientation. It will again depend on where you're going. They may give you a bit of an induction. You might also be asked to fill in gaps of shortages of staff or go to different locations as a locum. You might have to be more flexible. I worked in 3 different teams over 8 months, and although they were the same service, they were all slightly different. You might not be able to go on training that's offered to permanent staff, and you might not have development reviews as well. Again, that'll be depending on the employer, but often you don't get all the things that a permanent employer will get. You may have to move around to get your next role, of course, but I do know an OT that did it for 10 years consecutively as a locum, and they managed to go from contract to contract to stay in the same area of the country, so it is possible. with bank work, of course, they'll only call you when they're needed. So they'll put you in a pool and they'll call you. I had 2 bank roles in 2 different trusts to try and make sure that I did have work, but obviously it's not always reliable, and some staff seem to be able to get a lot of work, and the more you get established and the more roles you do, the better when you're called in. But often they're on 0-hour contracts as well, so that may go in the future, but it can be a bit of a difficulty. The positives of locum work, especially, the pay rates are a lot higher. They're paid on an hourly rate as well. Starting for an inexperienced locum, probably 15 up to £21 an hour. Further roles, agencies try to get you better subsequent rates, which could be mid-20s to or more per hour. And if you're relocating, they'll try and source accommodation for you as well. You get paid weekly rather than monthly. You'll have to pay a small fee though to an umbrella company that will help sort out your expenses and taxes, and they can vary, say, from £10 to £26 a week. You will also get food things like food allowances. Mine were £5 per 10 hours, which includes your travel as well, including that time. You can claim back commute mileage, which is taxable, reclaimable as tax, and also you will obviously, if you travel in the community, you'll get petrol mileage as well. Some also offer money to spent on training, around usually about £250. Short notice periods, you can move as well quickly. You probably can give a week's notice before you move to another contract, or you move to another job if you were getting a permanent role. Contracts obviously can lead to permanent work and longer contracts. Often staff are taken on after they've done a contract role and shown themselves capable. If a post is going, if staff leave, the locums are often the ones that they go to see if they want to then work as a permanent member of staff. And then once you've got one locum role under your belt and you've signed up for the agencies, it can be quite overwhelming, the amount of work that's on offer and how much jobs are being offered to you from different agencies. Obviously, if you lost your permanent role for some reason and you've done locum work before, locuming can be quicker to get into because they're usually looking for people within like 1 or 2 weeks to start, so it can be a lot quicker. With bank work, of course, you're likely to stay in one location for a longer period of time when they need you. You can also get like a mini rotation, so like locum work, you can get a lot of experience in a short period of time, but probably you get more support in a bank job than you would as a locum, and you're probably more likely even to get a permanent role if it came up as a bank staff, because you're actually in the company, so to speak, than as a locum. Looking at questions and answers, I'll just mention the number and then go through the answer. Well, number 1, to be honest, yes, I was nervous as starting with bank staff, and we did have inductions to help us though as bank, and the other staff were supportive and they knew we were newly qualified. But as I moved roles in different bank roles, the support got less inductions, and I think on my second bank role I really had to just hit the ground running almost like a locum and I had to do the job. I think that the thing that set me in good stead was my placement. My last placement, I had a lot of responsibility and I was quite autonomous at the end of that placement, and it gave me much more confidence, especially in the locum role, and it was similar in many ways. I feel it doesn't have to be a barrier though. You can draw on your placement experience or any previous experience, especially if it was related to health. I personally didn't have any experience in health before I did my course as an OT. Just be honest in your applications and honest with the agencies. Tell them what you can offer and find out what the job is, and then you can really see whether you can fill that role and whether they actually, you're the person for them and they're the job for you as well, because you need to be honest so you don't so there shouldn't be a problem at all. Number 2, again, relating to my first answer, being honest with the employer. You can ask if you're newly qualified, if there's going to be support, and if you need this, then the locum agencies can ask on your behalf. I did have bank work under my belt before, and I think that really was a help. So I would recommend probably doing something before locuming initially, because the locum role had some similarities to my final placement. I didn't need as much support though, and I only had a short induction, and I was working pretty much from week 1. I would recommend locum work keep in mind the negatives though, and many are at band 5 level. So if the job description sounds right and you feel that you've got the skills for it, after the employer's spoken to you, just ask the questions you need to ask to make sure the role's going to be used, so you don't get into a situation where you feel overwhelmed by the job. Number 3, I hope this was answered more fully earlier, but in my experience my first hourly rate was about £21 an hour. I've been offered subsequent roles of £25 and above in other locum roles, which I am looking at the moment. Any expenses related to work, travel, etc. are tax deductible. There's lots of locum work, and I mean really a lot, that come in now. But obviously the more areas you've worked in, the more you can go for different types. As mentioned, there's hopefully going to be some induction when you go in, but support's going to be less than an actual employee gets. Some of my bank work though, I have to say, I got less induction than on my locum job. So but of course on the bank you'll be probably starting on the NHS pay scale. So if you're newly qualified, you'll be starting at a band 5 salary. On number 4, yeah, there are less jobs for newly qualified, as locum I've already mentioned. Jumping to the last part of the question, working in a job similar in the past for one from placement does help. I've mentioned that. I know a newly qualified though that was a care worker before she was an OT, and she was taken as a locum straight after graduation, so it's possible. As I say, I only had 5 months work as a bank staff before my locum post, but it was really the last placement that gave me real confidence to do the work on my bank and obviously the locum. As bank jobs usually start, by the way, around, as I say, September for winter pressures. As for pay rates, a band 5 in the NHS starts about a bit above 21,000 per annum before tax. On my hourly rate plus expenses I took on in tax in 8 months, around £18,000 after tax. So that's about £27,000 per annum after tax. That's around £11,250 more than a band 5 takes home per annum. However, I was fortunate that my starting rate was quite high. It can be a lot less as a newly qualified, but personally I wasn't interested in that. It's nice, I suppose, but it was the experience that I wanted to gain. And as I say, contracts can be often short, so you have to do it, it's variable as well. You've got to think of it might be a short term that you're getting that rate, but after you move obviously to other contracts, you're probably going to get a higher rate if you want to. Finally, number 5, well, I hope I've already covered the first part. I only had 5 months experience, as I mentioned, and this colleague only had care work experience. But of course, the more you have, it's the better. But it's not always the case. It depends on the job. Some agencies, yes, they will only source experienced staff for the roles. It depends what the employer is asking for. I only switched client groups, I have to say, on the bank staff, but I did switch teams as locum. In the bank work, it was with the NHS, and I did have a literal introduction to the post, but again this got less on each move I did. And in the other trust I was with, I really didn't get any induction, and I was filling in for a band 6 who was on holiday, so I basically had to go on the ward and do the job almost from day one. The thing that changes the most really is paperwork, procedures, and obviously the client groups, and that's the thing that takes time to get used to. The OT process obviously is always the same. You're likely as a locum though, you're going to be put in a role that's probably more narrow in its function than maybe the permanent staff, who obviously know the role inside out. So you might be doing something specific like getting down waiting lists for a certain client group. And locum posts, they're usually about 3 months. Mine was renewed in 3-month periods after initial probation of 2 months, but that was because I was quite newly qualified. Well, I hope that's answered everything for you. If there's anything else you really have a question for, then I don't mind Emma giving you my email. Just title them locum OT question, or I might delete them as spam. Thank you, Carlo.